bringing news that matters to you. You're watching the Bahamas Tonight Northern Edition.
This is the Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition. Good evening, all. I'm Shashina Roll. As always, it's so great to have you with us. The Bahamas Maritime Authority hosting a high-level national maritime workshop here on Grand Bahama. The three-day conclave opened last night at the Grand Lucine Resort. Natalie Martinborough has the story.
The workshop will look at ways to improve the standards of implementation and enforcement of the International Maritime Organization's mandatory instruments. Participants include heads of the various government agencies and some private sector stakeholders. Chairman of the Bahamas Maritime Authority, Anthony Kiki Varakis, says a spirit of cooperation is needed to propel growth in the industry.
In many circumstances, we work in our own little box without considering the wider concerns of our organizations or indeed the Bahamas as a whole. If we are to come up with useful results, we must think outside that little box and consider how we can improve the whole maritime regime. What we decide here will help make Bahamian ships safer wherever they may be, and will ensure that any ships entering our waters and our ports can do so safely and cost-effectively.
Minister for Transport and Aviation, the Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin, says in a time of challenge and adversity, the country must look at areas such as the maritime sector that provide great opportunities. She says the government is committed to the expansion of the maritime industry.
The government is now in the process of developing a maritime policy which will cause us to maximize this natural resource which exists in abundance in our country. A policy of sustainable exploitation of our waters for energy, science and technology, and industry generally, fisheries, and trade, among other things. This will create new paradigms in our national development, new niches in our economic model, and new and exciting career opportunities for our young, bright minds.
But she says the government is taking steps to ensure that such opportunities are available to other islands of the Bahamas as well.
My ministry is reviewing port facilities nationwide, Eleuthera, Exuma, Bimini, Cat Island, Andros, Abaco, among the other islands, with a view to creating a more structured port administration, which will enhance the local economies and advance the maritime industry nationally. We are also now undertaking a study of the feasibility of creating a yacht registry for the registration of yachts worldwide, which has the potential of creating new economic streams for the Bahamas.
The workshop wraps up on Friday. Natalie Martinborough, ZNS Network News.
Well, Minister for Grand Bahama, Dr. Michael Darville, also addressing the opening session of the National Maritime Workshop. He says this sector contributes between 14% to 18% of the country's gross domestic product, and Grand Bahama has a major role to play in this industry.
Located just 60 miles off the coast of South Florida, Grand Bahama is truly blessed geographically. It is certainly positioned to become a force to reckon with in the maritime industry and is ready to play its role as a global player in logistics, ships repair, and other related maritime fields. I am convinced that Grand Bahamians are cognizant of the fact that we must continue to strive for excellence, constantly upgrading our skills, improve our standards while aggressively enforcing all maritime laws if we are going to be seen as a global player and capitalize on the economic benefits this lucrative industry has to offer.
Now, the conference will wrap up at the Grand Lucine Resort on Friday. In other news, the Bahamas Investment Authority, in association with the Grand Bahama Port Authority and the Commonwealth Business Council, will host the Bahamas International Investment and Business Forum February 20th through the 22nd. The forum will look at ways that Grand Bahama and the Bahamas can capitalize on the expansion of the Panama Canal, which is due to be completed in 2014. The forum will provide an opportunity for the government to articulate its trade and investment properties and offer a platform for stakeholders to highlight the unique advantages of the Bahamas as an international shipping, logistics, and business hub. The event will attract international and regional businesses and investors with a focus on Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. The theme for the two-day conference is At the Crossroads of the 21st Century Trade and Investment. The government's strategic plan for the further development of the financial services sector was recently unveiled on the island of Bimini. The minister responsible traveled to that island. He urged stakeholders to continue to work to make the sector a success. Joan Davis-Roll reports.
The island of Bimini welcomed hundreds of persons involved in the second largest industry in the country, the financial services sector, where they convened for a weekend retreat at the upscale Bimini Bay Resort. There are those involved in the financial sector, which contributes 20% of the country's gross domestic product, employs some 7,000 Bahamians. They heard from the Minister of Financial Services, the Honorable Ryan Pinder.
The Bahamas must take a leadership role in the region among CARICOM and CARIFORUM peers. A regional approach, in my opinion, is important to support our national approach. We as the Bahamas must be the leaders in this regard. The Bahamas has a strong reputation of proper regulation and a strong legislative and policy framework. My strategy incorporates this component of our leadership in the region. My strategy also involves the Bahamas systematically identifying those jurisdictions outside of the region with positions that are compatible with the Bahamas, so that discussions may be advanced with a view to developing common strategies addressing these initiatives.
Minister Pinder attempted to chart the government's strategic vision for the way forward in the financial services sector. He says the government is committed to maintaining its ranking internationally, as the sector in the Bahamas has become the envy of the region.
And my ministry is closely following the developments out of the OECD and the European Union to ensure that our views of the business sector are considered as we adjust our policies and our legislation. As the OECD strives to make its groupings more inclusive based on the demands of small countries like the Bahamas, my ministry will always be an active participant to ensure the Bahamas' views are always presented and included within the OECD process and, in fact, on the global stage. In fact, just last week, I had the opportunity to have a bilateral discussions with the Director of Multilateral Initiatives in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the United Kingdom. In our discussion, I raised the issue of the tax avoidance initiatives that seem to be originating from the European Union and the United Kingdom right now, with the goal to reassure the United Kingdom that the Bahamas is a sovereign nation. We are an independent jurisdiction that in every instance has demonstrated its compliance with international best practices.
Minister Pinder, in addressing the August body, emphasized the role the organization must play when it comes to this country's overall continued development.
Our government has a renewed commitment to consultation on matters that affect each and every one of your business. In particular, we seek to balance the need and the approach of the regulators with that of the business realities and the life in which we live. We must emphasize, however, that there is a strong and a distinct difference in the roles of the Bahamas Financial Services Board and the Ministry of Financial Services.
The overall goal of those involved in the financial services sector is to not only tap into local markets, but to increase their global reach. In Bimini, reporting for ZNS News, I'm Joan Davis-Roll.
Tonight, there is controversy brewing in the West as a local fisherman is calling for the authorities to address a disturbing issue that is now becoming a trend. Joan Davis-Roll explains.
For bone fisherman Tommy Foley Roll, son of the late legendary Israel Bonefish Foley Roll, there are mounting concerns among some fishermen regarding the fishing village of West End. Roll is speaking out about a vexing problem which he believes threatens the survival of that area's vital fishing industry.
Right now, we have a serious problem in the western area about the guys netting the snappers. It seems like it's an outlaw area now. There's no one's having respect for the marine life, and we have 10, 12, 14 boats each day going out and harvesting 500 to 1,000, 1,500 pounds are snappers, and you know, we need someone to come in and do something about it because it's out of control.
Roll says it is unfortunate that some fishermen are not concerned about preserving the fishing grounds for generations unborn. He says for the majority of fishermen using nets, it's not about survival.
No, I think it's all about greed right now. These guys are going out and they know they can get 5 to 1,000 pounds of fish. It has nothing to do about trying to make a living. It has something to do about how much money they can make each day. And it's sad because, you know, this is a fishing community. Most of the guys here rely on going out and hand lining to make a living, and no one is here to enforce the law. You know, we have foreigners come in, talk about protecting the sharks, talk about protecting the turtles, and us as Bahamians, we can't be heard.
While Roll is appealing for government intervention, local fisheries officer Clement Campbell says once proper fishing guidelines are followed, net fishermen are within the law.
On this particular issue, it's a touchy one. I have a lot of complaints, direct, one-on-one with fishermen down here, and also from casual fishermen, weekend fishermen, who goes out and they claims that they can't catch no fish because the water's being depleted of the area that they go into fishermen. The person that's hauling fish by net, they are within their rights. There's no restrictions on hauling fish by net, except the size of the net and the zone, the distance from mainland to where they haul fish. What one of my concern is for the netting is, I think it should be like seasonal. I don't think that they should be able to haul fish all year round. I think there should be like a certain month period time, instead of like January, February, March, all year round hauling. Should be a mandate on that.
Tommy, in the spirit of his late father, has vowed to intensify his campaign against net fishing until his voice is heard and something is done by the powers that be. Joan Davis Roll, ZNS Network News.
Well, as Grand Bahama Island fights to regain the magic, many businesses on the island are struggling to stay afloat. In recent times, many companies have grabbed headlines, having been placed in receivership. Tonight, a local attorney explains this process and its impact on the business community. While the island of Grand Bahama continues to suffer the effects of an economic downturn, many businesses here on the island are also facing serious problems. Some are unable to pay their debts and have been placed in receivership by their creditors. Attorney at law Constance McDonald explains this process.
Normally, when a company is unable to pay its debts, there are several options a person has. They can go to court and have a receiver appointed. What the receiver would do is go into the business and collect, also, first of all, do a report and collect funds to pay off the debt. Now, a receiver can be appointed under the Companies Act. It can be appointed by a mortgagee. So, for example, if a bank has a loan with a business, usually in the mortgage document itself, it would give the bank the power to have a receiver appointed.
The process of receivership has affected major companies on Grand Bahama, like Butler's Specialty Food Store, where the owner, Jeff Butler, says his landlord owed him more than he owed the landlord. But McDonald says in most cases, the process is a depiction of Grand Bahama's sluggish economy.
It shows what's happening in Grand Bahama, because in Grand Bahama now, things are very I would say that Grand Bahama right now is economically challenged. You have a lot of persons in business, and the businesses aren't necessarily making the money to pay the debts. And so the creditors are, they want their money. They're not concerned about the fact that you may not have the money to pay the debt. They want their money. And so they will take you, if they make a demand for their money and you don't pay, they take you to court and they can get a receiver appointed. You see, because sometimes it is that people don't really believe that you can't afford to pay.
She says this process can be seen on Grand Bahama more than any other island, and she's giving this advice to business owners.
NASA is not as economically challenged as Grand Bahama. And then, too, what happens sometimes, too, is that people, even though, I always say to persons, when you're having a problem paying your bills, pay a little something every time. You see, because even if you go to court, if someone gets a judgment against you and you go to court and you're making an effort to pay, it shows that at least you're trying, you're challenged, but you're making an effort.